A weathered fisherman on the remote shores of Ravencrest Bay thought he was just saving another reckless tourist from the treacherous waters of Siren's Edge. Little did Kai Thorrenson know that this simple act of courage would lead to a helicopter landing on his dock the very next day, carrying someone who would change not just his life, but the entire future of Misthaven forever. This is the incredible true story of how one moment of bravery unleashed a chain of events that nobody could have predicted. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our community of over 500,000 viewers who love extraordinary true stories that prove life is more remarkable than fiction. And don't forget to ring that notification bell because you won't want to miss what happens next in this unbelievable tale. The morning fog rolled thick across Ravencrest Bay, wrapping Kai Thorrenson's weather-beaten dock in a ghostly embrace. Local fishermen called this particular stretch of coastline Thunder Point, not just because of the way storms would gather here first, but because of the thunderous crash of waves against the treacherous rocks of Siren's Edge nearby. Kai stood at the edge of his dock, his calloused hands wrapped around a steaming mug of black coffee. At 62, his face was a map of every storm he'd weathered, every fish he'd caught, and every sunrise he'd witnessed over these waters. His silver hair, still thick despite his years, whipped around his face in the morning breeze, and his steel-gray eyes scanned the horizon with the practiced precision of someone who'd spent more time reading waves than books. This morning felt different somehow. The fog was thicker than usual, and there was an electricity in the air that Kai had learned to recognize over his 4 decades as a fisherman. It wasn't the harbinger of a storm. No, this was something else entirely. The seabirds were quieter, the waves more insistent, as if nature itself was holding its breath in anticipation. Reuben Blackwater, the harbor master, had warned all local boats to stay docked today. A prestigious deep-sea diving expedition was scheduled to explore an underwater archaeological site near Siren's Edge. Rich tourists playing explorer, Kai had grumbled when he heard the news, but he respected the water too much to ignore official warnings. Instead of heading out to his usual fishing spots, Kai busied himself with maintaining his beloved vessel, the Storm Chaser. It wasn't the biggest or newest boat in Misthaven, but it was his home away from home. Every dent and scratch told a story, like the deep groove along the starboard side from when he'd rescued Marina Stormwind's yacht during last year's unexpected squall. As Kai worked, his mind wandered to the changes he'd seen in Misthaven over the years. The small fishing town had slowly started attracting more tourists, drawn by its untamed beauty and the legends of shipwrecks around Siren's Edge. Most locals welcomed the economic boost, but Kai preferred the quiet life, the rhythm of the tides, and the solitude of the sea. The fog began to thin around mid-morning, revealing patches of steel-gray sky. That's when Kai heard it, a sound that didn't belong among the familiar symphony of waves and seabirds. A shout, distant but distinct, carried on the wind. He straightened up, his body tensing as he scanned the water. Years of experience had taught him that the sea rarely gave you a second chance to hear a cry for help. Through the dissipating fog, he caught a glimpse of something bright orange, a diving suit, he realized, bobbing among the waves dangerously close to Siren's Edge. The figure was struggling, their movements becoming increasingly erratic. Without hesitation, Kai sprang into action, his age forgotten as muscle memory took over. The Storm Chaser roared to life under his touch, responding to his commands like an extension of his own body. As he guided the boat toward the struggling diver, Kai could see that the current was pulling them closer to the rocks with each passing second. The situation was even more dire than he'd initially thought. Pieces of expensive diving equipment floated nearby, suggesting something had gone seriously wrong with the expedition. What Kai couldn't know as he raced against time was that this rescue would set in motion a series of events that would not only change his life, but rewrite the future of Misthaven itself. The identity of the person he was about to save would turn out to be just the first of many surprises waiting to unfold in the fog-shrouded waters of Ravencrest Bay. The Storm Chaser cut through the waves with practiced precision as Kai maneuvered closer to the struggling diver. The orange diving suit was now barely visible between the swells, and with each passing moment, the current dragged its victim closer to the jagged rocks of Siren's Edge. Time was running out. Kai had seen enough accidents around these waters to know that the next few minutes would determine whether this would be a rescue or a recovery. The thought sent a chill down his spine, despite the sweat beading on his forehead. He'd already lost too many good people to these treacherous waters. He wasn't about to let them claim another soul. As he drew closer, he could see that the diver was fighting against panic, their movements becoming increasingly desperate. Through the spray of salt water, Kai noticed something unusual about the diving equipment scattered across the surface. It was state-of-the-art gear, the kind that cost more than his boat. Whatever expedition this diver had been part of, it wasn't your typical tourist excursion. "Hold on!" Kai's voice boomed across the water, carrying the authority of someone who'd spent a lifetime commanding vessels through storms. "I'm coming to get you!" The diver's head turned toward his voice, and for a brief moment their movements steadied. That's when Kai saw something that made his blood run cold. A dark shape moving beneath the surface, something large enough to create its own current. These waters were home to all manner of marine life, and not all of them were friendly to struggling swimmers. Without hesitation, Kai grabbed his rescue line and made a split-second decision. The conventional approach would be to try and bring the boat closer, but with those rocks and that underwater movement, he couldn't risk it. There was only one choice, and it was the kind of choice that separated those who lived to tell tales from those who became cautionary legends. "Marina!" he shouted to his unexpected guest, Marina Stormwind, who had been helping him with boat maintenance when the crisis began. "Take the wheel. Keep her steady but ready to move fast." Marina didn't waste time with questions. She'd worked these waters long enough to know that in moments like these, hesitation meant death. She took control of the storm chaser, with the same quiet competence she brought to everything else. Kai stripped off his heavy jacket, secured the rescue line to his waist, and dove into the churning waters. The cold hit him like a physical blow, but he pushed through it, his powerful strokes cutting through the waves with the determination of someone who refused to let the sea claim another victim. The current was stronger than he'd anticipated, pulling at him with hungry fingers, trying to drag him toward the same rocks that threatened the diver. But Kai knew these waters intimately, every current, every hidden surge, every treacherous eddy. He worked with them rather than against them, using their force to propel him closer to his target. As he neared the diver, he could see that exhaustion was taking its toll. The person's movements were becoming sluggish, their head barely staying above water. Kai increased his pace, ignoring the burning in his muscles and the icy grip of the sea. "I've got you," he called out, finally reaching the diver. "Stop struggling and let me help." The diver's eyes met his, dark, intelligent eyes wide with fear, but still sharp with awareness. A good sign. Too often by this point, panic had completely overtaken reason. Kai quickly assessed the situation. The diver's equipment was tangled, creating a dangerous drag in the water. Something had gone seriously wrong with what should have been a routine dive. With practiced efficiency, Kai worked to free the diver from the tangled equipment while keeping them both afloat. The dark shape he'd noticed earlier moved beneath them again, closer this time. Whether it was curious or hungry, Kai didn't intend to find out. "Marina!" he shouted over the waves. "Get ready and watch the port side. We've got company." The rescue line began to pull taut as Marina carefully maneuvered the storm chaser closer. Kai could feel the diver's grip on him weakening. They needed to move fast. With one powerful kick, he propelled them both toward the boat, timing their movement with the surge of a wave. That's when everything happened at once. The dark shape surged upward, revealing itself as a massive basking shark, harmless to humans under normal circumstances, but capable of causing serious damage with its sheer size. The wave Kai had been counting on suddenly shifted, pushed aside by the shark's movement. And from the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of something metallic glinting on the diver's wrist. Something that looked suspiciously like the kind of watch that cost more than most people made in a year. In that moment, as he fought against the sea itself to save this mysterious diver, Kai had no way of knowing that this watch, this seemingly insignificant detail, would become a crucial piece of the puzzle that was about to unfold. But right now, his entire world had narrowed to one simple task: getting them both back to the boat alive. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The immediate aftermath of a rescue always carried its own kind of tension. That delicate moment when adrenaline began to ebb and reality started to seep back in. As Kai and Marina helped pull the mysterious diver onto the deck of the storm chaser, the fog around Ravencrest Bay started to lift, as if nature itself was pulling back the curtain on what would become an extraordinary revelation. The diver lay on the deck, coughing up seawater and struggling to remove his damaged helmet. Kai noticed his hands were shaking, not from cold or fear, but with the kind of tremor that spoke of physical exhaustion. When the helmet finally came off, both Kai and Marina froze in surprise. They found themselves staring at a face that seemed oddly familiar, though neither could immediately place it. The man was in his early 40s, with sharp features and striking gray eyes that held an intensity that even near drowning couldn't dim. His black hair, though plastered to his head from the seawater, was streaked with distinguished silver at the temples, but it was his first words that truly caught them off guard. "My research," he gasped, still fighting to steady his breathing. "Please, or we have to recover my research equipment." His accent was difficult to place, somewhere between South American and European, cultured but with an edge of urgency that transcended any national origin. "Sir, you nearly died," Marina interjected, wrapping a thermal blanket around his shoulders. "The equipment can wait." The stranger shook his head with surprising vehemence. "You don't understand. That equipment contains 5 years of research data. Without it..." He tried to stand but swayed dangerously, forcing Kai to steady him. "I'm Eliseo Valdenegro," he said, his voice gaining strength even as his body trembled with exhaustion. "And what's in those devices could change everything we know about marine archaeology." The name hit Kai like a physical blow. Everyone in the scientific community knew of Dr. Eliseo Valdenegro, the brilliant but controversial marine archaeologist who had revolutionized deep-sea exploration technology. His theories about ancient underwater civilizations had made him both famous and infamous in academic circles. Some called him a visionary. Others dismissed him as a wealthy dreamer chasing impossible theories. Marina's eyes widened in recognition. Dr. Valdenegro? The one who discovered the underwater ruins off the coast of Chile? Eliseo nodded wearily, his eyes constantly drawing back to the waters where his equipment had disappeared. "This site, it's not just another archaeological dig. I've found something here that could rewrite history, but without those sensors and data drives." His voice trailed off as another coughing fit overtook him. Kai found himself studying the man more carefully now. The expensive watch on his wrist, a limited edition Patek Philippe, suddenly made sense. But there was something else about Valdenegro that didn't quite fit the image of a wealthy academic. His hands, though elegant, bore the kind of calluses that only came from real work. And the way he had handled himself in the water even when in danger showed someone who was no stranger to the practical side of marine exploration. "Your expedition team," Kai said suddenly, realization dawning. "They should be looking for you by now. Where are they?" A shadow passed over Eliseo's face. "There is no team," he admitted quietly. "This expedition, it's not exactly official. The academic community, they wouldn't." He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "Let's just say that when you're pursuing something that challenges established theories, funding becomes difficult to secure." Marina and Kai exchanged glances. The situation was becoming more complex by the minute. A world-renowned archaeologist, diving alone in one of the most dangerous stretches of water on the coast, chasing what appeared to be an unsanctioned research project, it raised more questions than it answered. "Those ruins you're researching," Marina ventured, her curiosity getting the better of her. "They're connected to the legends about Siren's Edge, aren't they? The stories about an ancient settlement that disappeared beneath the waves?" Eliseo's eyes lit up with an almost feverish intensity. "Not legends," he corrected. "History. Hidden history that's been staring us in the face for centuries. Your local myths about singing heard from beneath the waves, the unusual magnetic anomalies around the rocks, the unexplained patterns of marine life migration. They're all connected. But I found something else down there. Something that proves. He stopped abruptly, another violent shiver running through his body. The excitement of sharing his discoveries had momentarily overcome his physical condition, but now the aftermath of his near drowning was catching up with him. "You need medical attention," Kai said firmly, already turning the boat toward harbor. "Whatever's down there has waited centuries. It can wait a few more hours." What Kai didn't realize as he set course for Misthaven's small medical center was that those few hours would prove crucial. By sunrise the next day, the quiet routine of his life would be completely upended, starting with the unexpected arrival of a helicopter carrying someone whose connection to Eliseo Valdenegro would prove even more surprising than the archaeologist's presence in these waters. The Northern Lights Medical Center was hardly more than a clinic by city standards, but it was all Misthaven had. As Kai sat in the waiting room's worn chair, he could hear the muffled voices of Dr. Sarah Chen and her staff as they tended to Eliseo Valdenegro. The old clock on the wall ticked away relentlessly, marking each moment of what was becoming the strangest day in Kai's recent memory. Marina had stayed behind at the harbor, coordinating with Ruben Blackwater to organize a search for Eliseo's lost research equipment. The harbor master had been skeptical at first, but the mention of Dr. Valdenegro's name had changed his attitude immediately. Now, several local boats were combing the waters near Siren's edge, though the approaching darkness would soon force them to suspend their efforts. Kai's clothes were still damp from the rescue, but he barely noticed. His mind was too busy piecing together the puzzle that had quite literally fallen into his lap. The expensive diving gear, the secretive research, the desperate concern for the lost equipment. None of it quite added up to a complete picture. And then there were those strange readings Marina had noticed on the storm chaser's sonar just before they'd heard the cry for help. His thoughts were interrupted by Dr. Chen emerging from the treatment room, her face bearing the kind of expression that suggested she was dealing with a particularly difficult patient. "He's stable," she announced, pulling up a chair next to Kai. "But he's also one of the most stubborn individuals I've ever treated. He's already trying to convince my staff to discharge him so he can return to his research." Kai couldn't help but smile. Sounds about right for someone crazy enough to dive Siren's Edge alone. Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. "About that, there's something odd about his condition. The near drowning aside, his body shows signs of recent exposure to extreme pressure changes. Multiple dives far deeper than anyone should be attempting in these waters. Whatever he's looking for down there, he's been pushing human limits to find it." Before Kai could respond, a commotion erupted from the treatment room. One of the nurses rushed out looking flustered. "Dr. Chen, he's insisting on making a phone call. Says it's a matter of international importance." Dr. Chen sighed and hurried back to the room, leaving Kai alone with his thoughts once again. Through the thin walls, he could hear fragments of an intense conversation in what sounded like Spanish, punctuated by occasional words in English and what might have been Latin. Eliseo's voice grew increasingly animated until finally, "They're coming?" The question, clear and loud, was followed by silence. Minutes later, Dr. Chen emerged again, this time with a puzzled look on her face. "Mr. Thorrenson, he's asking for you. Says there's something you need to know before they arrive." The treatment room was stark and clinical, brightened only by the orange glow of the setting sun through its single window. Eliseo sat propped up in bed looking remarkably composed for someone who had nearly drowned just hours ago. The expensive watch on his wrist caught the sunlight, sending brief flashes across the room. "Kai," Eliseo began, his voice stronger now. "I owe you my life, and more than that, I owe you an explanation. But first, I need to know. What do you know about the Temple of Poseidon?" The question caught Kai off guard. "Only what everyone around here knows. Local legend says there was once a temple or a monastery on these shores, built by some ancient seafaring culture. Supposedly, it was swallowed by the sea during a great storm. Most people think it's just a story to attract tourists." Eliseo's eyes lit up with that same intense fire Kai had seen on the boat. "What if I told you it wasn't just a story? What if I told you that for the past 5 years, I've been following a trail of evidence that suggests not only did the temple exist, but it was part of something far more significant than anyone has imagined?" He reached for a waterproof bag that had somehow survived his ordeal, pulling out a tablet in a heavily reinforced case. The screen flickered to life, revealing a series of complex sonar images and what appeared to be ancient texts. "Look at this," Eliseo said, his fingers dancing across the screen. "These structural patterns, hidden beneath centuries of sediment, they're not random formations. They're built on mathematical principles that weren't supposed to exist in this part of the world until centuries later. And these symbols..." He zoomed in on what looked like inscriptions. "They share elements with both ancient Nordic runes and early Phoenician scripts. It's impossible, but it exists." Kai leaned closer, fascinated despite his natural skepticism. The images did show something unusual. Geometric patterns too regular to be natural, structures that seemed to follow some kind of deliberate design. "But that's not why they're coming," Eliseo continued, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. "3 days ago I found something else, something that explains why this site was chosen, why the temple was built here of all places, something that could change everything we think we know about." He was cut off by the sudden sound of rotor blades approaching in the distance. Eliseo's face paled slightly, though his expression remained determined. "They're early," he muttered, checking his watch. "Kai, listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you needs to stay between us, at least for now. The lost equipment, it contains proof of something that certain people would prefer, remained hidden. That's why I need your help. Because tomorrow morning, when that helicopter lands on your dock, everything is going to change. Not just for us, but potentially for all of human history." The sun had long since set over Misthaven by the time Kai helped Eliseo back to Thunder Point. Against Dr. Chen's strict medical advice, the archaeologist had insisted on being discharged, claiming that waiting until morning wasn't an option. The night air was thick with an unusual warmth for this time of year, and an unseasonal fog had begun rolling in again, as if nature itself was conspiring to add mystery to an already enigmatic situation. Marina met them at the dock, her expression a mixture of excitement and concern. "They found something," she announced without preamble, her voice barely audible over the gentle lapping of waves against the pylons. "About an hour ago, one of the search boats picked up an unusual signal near the deep water trench past Siren's edge. It wasn't your equipment, Doctor Valdenegro, but..." "Let me guess," Eliseo interrupted, his face illuminated by the dock's single floodlight. "The signal appeared to be moving, despite there being no current at that depth?" Marina's eyes widened. "How did you know?" Eliseo shared a knowing look with Kai. "Because that's exactly what I was tracking when everything went wrong this morning. Whatever's down there, it's not just ruins, it's active. Somehow, after all these centuries, it's still active." The sound of approaching helicopter rotors had faded after their departure from the medical center, but now a different kind of tension filled the air. Kai could feel it in his bones, the same way he could feel an approaching storm long before the first clouds appeared. Something significant was about to happen, and Thunder Point was going to be at the center of it. "Dr. Valdenegro," Kai said carefully, "before whoever you called arrives, I think we deserve to know what we're really dealing with here. What exactly did you find down there?" Eliseo seemed to age years in the moments before he answered, the weight of his discovery evident in every line of his face. He reached into his salvaged waterproof bag and withdrew what appeared to be an ordinary piece of coral. But as he held it under the floodlight, Kai and Marina could see it was anything but ordinary. "This is just a small piece," Eliseo explained. "A fragment that broke off during one of my earlier dives. Look closely at the structure." Marina leaned in first, her background in marine biology immediately apparent in her sharp intake of breath. "This is impossible," she whispered. "These patterns, they're not natural formations. They look almost like..." "Circuit boards," Eliseo finished for her. "Except this isn't modern technology. The dating puts this at least 3,000 years old, possibly older. And it's not alone down there. There's an entire network of these structures, all interconnected, all showing signs of deliberate design and purpose." Kai felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "You're saying our ancient temple wasn't just a temple?" Eliseo nodded. "I believe it was some kind of monitoring station, built by a civilization far more advanced than anything we've previously discovered from that era. The legends about singing from beneath the waves? They were probably picking up frequencies emitted by whatever power source is still operating down there. Before anyone could respond, a new sound cut through the night, the distinctive whir of an approaching boat's engine, running dark. Moments later, a sleek vessel emerged from the fog, its black hull seeming to absorb what little light reached it. It pulled up alongside Thunder Point with practiced precision. A figure emerged from the cabin, their features obscured by the poor lighting. But when they spoke, their voice carried an authority that seemed to demand attention. "Dr. Valdenegro," the figure called out, "I see you've managed to get yourself into trouble again." The voice belonged to a woman, her accent a curious blend of Japanese and British English. As she stepped into the floodlight's glow, Kai found himself facing Dr. Astrid Nakamura, whose reputation in the field of ancient technology was matched only by the mysteries surrounding her private research foundation. "Astrid," Eliseo acknowledged with a slight nod. "I wasn't expecting you until morning's helicopter arrival." Dr. Nakamura's laugh was as sharp as cut crystal. "Did you really think I'd wait for daylight after what you told me, especially given what our satellites picked up an hour ago?" She turned to address Kai directly, her gaze unnervingly intense. "Mr. Thorrenson, I understand we have you to thank for Dr. Valdenegro's continued existence. I should warn you, though, by saving his life, you've become part of something far larger than you could imagine. And after what's going to happen tomorrow morning, your life will never be quite the same." The fog continued to thicken around them, and somewhere in the distance, a deep, almost subsonic hum began to emanate from the direction of Siren's Edge. The night was far from over, and tomorrow's helicopter would bring more than just additional researchers to Thunder Point. The night had been long and filled with revelations. As the first hints of dawn began to paint the horizon, Kai stood at his usual spot on Thunder Point, but everything felt different. His familiar cup of morning coffee had been replaced by his third cup of Dr. Nakamura's expensive imported tea, and his quiet dock had been transformed into an impromptu research station. Throughout the night, sophisticated equipment had been unloaded from Astrid's vessel, the Quantum Shadow. Banks of monitors now lined the interior of Kai's modest dock office, each displaying data streams that would have been incomprehensible to him just hours ago. But after Astrid's crash course in quantum archaeology, a field he hadn't even known existed until last night, he was beginning to understand the magnitude of what lay beneath Ravencrest Bay's waters. "The frequency is getting stronger," Marina called out from her position at one of the monitoring stations. She'd proven invaluable throughout the night, her marine biology background allowing her to quickly grasp the implications of what they were observing. "It's almost as if it knows we're watching," Eliseo finished, his eyes fixed on a particular pattern dancing across one of the screens. Despite his earlier ordeal, he'd refused to rest, driven by a mixture of excitement and what seemed like growing concern. Dr. Nakamura moved with precise grace between the monitoring stations, her traditional Japanese kimono jacket incongruous yet somehow perfect against the backdrop of advanced technology. "The pattern matches what we found in the South Pacific site," she confirmed, "but the energy signature is at least 10 times stronger. Eliseo, I owe you an apology. You were right all along." Kai watched as the two scientists exchanged meaningful looks. There was history there, he could tell, but also something more immediate and urgent. "Would someone like to explain what exactly we're looking at?" he asked, his patience with the cryptic exchanges finally wearing thin. Astrid nodded to Eliseo, who pulled up a new display on the main screen. "Do you remember the coral-like structure I showed you last night?" he began. "Well, it's part of something much larger. We believe the ancient temple wasn't built near the water. It was built to monitor what was already in the water." The screen showed a three-dimensional mapping of the seafloor around Siren's Edge. Overlaid on the natural topography was a geometric pattern so precise it could only be artificial. But what caught Kai's attention was the scale. The structure extended for miles in every direction, far larger than any ancient construction should be. 3 months ago, Astrid continued, my foundation detected similar patterns at sites around the world. always near ancient legends of temples or cities lost to the sea, always emitting the same type of quantum frequency. But this site, she gestured to the screens around them. This is different. It's not just active, it's awakening. The mysterious humming that had begun the night before had grown stronger with the approaching dawn. Even those without scientific training could feel it now, a vibration that seemed to resonate with something deep in their bones. "The helicopter that's coming," Kai said slowly, putting the pieces together. "It's not just bringing more researchers, is it?" "No," Eliseo confirmed. "It's bringing Dr. Helena Vasquez, the head of the United Nations Special Committee on Pre-Classical Civilizations. After what we've discovered here, certain protocols have been activated." Marina looked up sharply from her station. "Wait, you don't mean—" "Resolution 1872, Astrid said grimly. "The Atlantis Protocol." The name hung in the air like static before a lightning strike. Even Kai, who had spent his life focused on the practical rather than the academic, knew the implications. The Atlantis Protocol was supposed to be theoretical, a set of procedures created by the UN for the possibility, however remote, of discovering evidence of advanced ancient civilizations. The fact that it had been activated. A sudden surge in the humming interrupted his thoughts. One of the monitors began emitting a high-pitched alert, and all eyes turned to the screen showing the underwater mapping. "Energy spike!" Marina called out, her fingers flying over the controls. "The pattern is changing." The geometric structure on the screen was indeed shifting, lines of force flowing like liquid mathematics. At the same moment, every compass in the dock office began to spin wildly, and the sophisticated equipment started displaying readings that caused both Astrid and Eliseo to pale visibly. "It's not just awakening," Eliseo whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and fear. "It's responding. All this time we thought we were studying it, but it's been studying us," Astrid finished, her usual composure cracking slightly. The distant sound of helicopter rotors cut through the tension, growing louder with each passing second. Dawn had fully broken now, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, but none of those present were admiring the sunrise. All eyes were fixed either on the approaching helicopter or on the waters of Ravencrest Bay, where something that had slept for millennia was finally stirring to wakefulness. The sleek black helicopter emerged from the dawn light like a messenger of fate, its rotors cutting through the golden morning air with precise determination. As it descended toward Thunder Point, Kai could make out the subtle UN insignia on its side, almost invisible against the dark paint. But what caught his attention was the second symbol next to it, a circular design he'd never seen before, featuring what appeared to be an ancient nautilus shell intertwined with modern scientific symbols. "The Nautilus Division," Eliseo explained, noting Kai's interest despite the roar of the approaching aircraft. "A branch of the UN that officially doesn't exist, dedicated to investigating anomalies that challenge our understanding of human history." The helicopter's touchdown was perfectly executed, its skids meeting the reinforced section of Kai's dock with barely a shudder. As the rotors began to slow, Kai noticed something odd about the aircraft. Its surface seemed to shimmer slightly, as if the metal itself was somehow out of phase with the surrounding reality. "Quantum shielding," Astrid murmured, answering his unspoken question. "After what happened at the South Pacific site, we take no chances with electromagnetic anomalies." The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss and Dr. Helena Vasquez emerged. She was tall and striking, with silver hair worn in a complex braid and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of too many secrets. Her movements were deliberate and graceful as she stepped onto the dock, followed by two individuals whose bearings screamed security despite their civilian attire. "Dr. Nakamura, Dr. Valdenegro," she greeted them, her voice carrying a slight Argentine accent. "I see the situation has escalated exactly as we feared." Her gaze shifted to Kai and Marina. "And these must be our local variables." Before anyone could respond, one of the monitoring stations erupted in a cascade of alerts. Marina rushed to the screens, her face illuminated by the sudden flood of data. "The frequency pattern just changed again. It's like nothing we've seen before." Dr. Vasquez moved to the monitors with surprising speed, her expression shifting from diplomatic neutrality to intense focus. "Show me the quantum variance readings." As Marina pulled up the requested data, Kai noticed something that made his blood run cold. The mysterious humming that had been building since the previous night had stopped completely. The sudden silence felt more ominous than any sound. "It's exactly what happened in the South Pacific," Eliseo said quietly. "Right before." He never finished the sentence. A flash of light erupted from the waters near Siren's edge, accompanied by a sound that seemed to bypass their ears and resonate directly in their minds. Every piece of electronic equipment on the dock flickered simultaneously. "Full containment protocols!" Dr. Vasquez barked the order, all pretense of civilian research abandoned. Her security detail moved with practiced efficiency, deploying what looked like advanced sensor equipment from cases they'd brought from the helicopter. "Mr. Thorrenson," Dr. Vasquez turned to Kai, her intensity almost palpable. "You know these waters better than anyone. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you believe about human history, but right now, we need your expertise. That structure down there? It's not just an archaeological find. It's part of a network, a system created by a civilization that existed long before our earliest recorded history. And now, after thousands of years of dormancy, it's reactivating." She pulled out a tablet, displaying a map that made Kai's eyes widen. It showed similar sites around the world, all pulsing with the same energy signature they'd detected here. But Ravencrest Bay's signal was by far the strongest. "We believe this was more than just a monitoring station," she continued. "Based on the energy readings and architectural patterns, we think it was some kind of control center. The legends about singing from the deep, the magnetic anomalies, they were all side effects of its primary function." "Which was?" Marina asked, though her tone suggested she already feared the answer. "Communication," Astrid interjected, "but not with anything on Earth. The quantum frequency patterns match theoretical models for transdimensional signaling. Whatever our ancestors built here, they were trying to contact something. Somewhere else." Another flash from the water interrupted them, this time accompanied by a visible distortion in the air above Siren's edge. The security detail's equipment began emitting a high-pitched whine. "Quantum breach imminent," one of them called out. "Energy signatures match the South Pacific incident." Dr. Vasquez's expression hardened. "How long since you found the coral fragment?" she demanded of Eliseo. 72 hours, he replied. "Why?" "Because that's exactly how long it took at the other site, from first contact to full activation. We're not just observers anymore. We're participants in something that was set in motion thousands of years ago. And if we're right about what's on the other end of that signal..." She looked at each of them in turn. "The world as we know it is about to change forever." The waters around Siren's edge began to churn, not from any natural current, but from something deeper, something awakening. And as the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, Kai realized that saving a drowning archaeologist had been just the first step in a journey that would challenge the very foundations of human history. The morning sun that should have been warming Thunder Point seemed to bend and distort as it passed through the air above Siren's edge. The quantum breach was no longer just a scientific reading on their instruments. It had become a visible reality, warping the fabric of space itself in ways that made the eyes hurt to observe directly. "Energy levels are off the charts," Marina called out from her station, her voice steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. "The pattern isn't just changing anymore, it's evolving." Dr. Vasquez and her security team had deployed a perimeter of quantum stabilizers around the dock, their sleek surfaces humming with barely contained power. But even these advanced devices seemed to be struggling against whatever force was emanating from beneath the waves. "This is beyond anything we saw in the South Pacific," Astrid observed, her fingers dancing across multiple keyboards as she attempted to make sense of the readings. "The quantum resonance is at least 3 orders of magnitude stronger. It's as if this site was meant to be more than just a relay station," Eliseo finished, his eyes fixed on a particular data stream. Look at these architectural patterns emerging from the deep scan. The structure isn't just a building, it's a machine. A quantum computer built thousands of years before we even understood the concept of basic mathematics. Kai, who had been helping the security team secure loose equipment against the increasingly violent electromagnetic disturbances, noticed something that made him pause. The mysterious humming that had stopped earlier hadn't actually ceased. It had changed frequency, dropping so low that it was now more felt than heard, and it seemed to be forming a pattern. "Dr. Vasquez," he called out. "The vibrations in the dock supports. They're not random. They're repeating in sequences like code," Dr. Vasquez finished, her eyes widening. She rushed to one of the monitoring stations, quickly adjusting several settings. "Quick, run it through the quantum harmonic translator." The next few moments were a blur of activity as the team worked to capture and decode the vibrations. The quantum breach above Siren's edge had grown larger, its edges shimmering with colors that shouldn't exist in normal space. The water beneath it had begun to move in impossible ways, flowing in patterns that defied gravity. "Got it," Marina announced suddenly. "The translation matrix is stabilizing and it's... oh my god." Everyone crowded around her screen, where lines of text were beginning to form. But these weren't any known ancient language. They were modern English, being translated in real time from quantum vibrations emanating from a structure built thousands of years ago. "We have waited long," the text began. "The signal is received. The network awakens. It's responding to us," Eliseo whispered, his voice filled with awe. "All these years of research, of searching for proof. They didn't just leave us their technology. They left us a message." Dr. Vasquez's security team had drawn closer, their professional detachment cracking in the face of this extraordinary development. One of them was quietly recording everything on specialized equipment, while the other maintained contact with what was presumably their headquarters. More text appeared on the screen. "The Great Cycle nears completion. The children of Earth have reached the threshold. Prepare for convergence." "The threshold," Astrid repeated thoughtfully. "In the South Pacific site, we found references to a great threshold in some of the encoded patterns. We thought it was metaphorical, but now..." A sudden surge in the quantum field interrupted her speculation. The breach above Siren's edge pulsed with new energy, and for a brief moment everyone present felt a sensation like reality itself was holding its breath. "Multiple quantum signatures detected," one of the security team announced. They're appearing all over the world. Every site we've identified is activating simultaneously." Dr. Vasquez moved with urgent purpose to the quantum stabilizers, making rapid adjustments. "This is what we prepared for, people. Protocol Omega is now in effect. Mr. Thorrenson, Ms. Stormwind, I know this is overwhelming, but we need your help. Your knowledge of these waters might be crucial in the next few hours." "Hours?" Marina asked, looking up from her station. "What happens in a few hours?" Before anyone could respond, a new message appeared on the screen, this one pulsing with an urgency that seemed to transcend the digital display. "The gateway opens at Meridian. The architects return. All will be revealed." The implications hit everyone at once. Meridian. Local noon. Whatever force they had awakened, whatever intelligence had left this ancient message, was planning to make contact in just a few hours. "Now you understand why the helicopter arrived so quickly," Dr. Vasquez said grimly. "We're not just dealing with an archaeological discovery or even ancient technology. We're dealing with a pre-planned event, set in motion thousands of years ago, designed to activate when humanity reached a certain level of technological advancement. And we just proved we're ready by successfully detecting and interpreting their quantum signals." Kai looked out over the churning waters, where the impossible colors of the quantum breach painted the morning sky in alien hues. In less than a day, he had gone from saving a drowning archaeologist to standing at the threshold of what might be the most important moment in human history. "I hope we're ready for whatever comes through that gateway," he said quietly. "Ready or not," Eliseo replied, his eyes fixed on the growing disturbance above Siren's edge. "We're about to meet our ancestors, or perhaps something far more extraordinary. Thunder Point had become the eye of a storm that was rapidly engulfing the entire world. As the morning progressed, Kai's modest dock had transformed into something resembling a military command center. Additional helicopters had arrived, bringing more UN personnel and equipment. The quantum stabilizers now formed a complete ring around the perimeter, their humming a constant reminder of the extraordinary situation unfolding. Marina's monitoring station had become the focal point of a global information network. Screens displayed similar quantum breaches appearing at ancient sites worldwide, off the coast of Japan, in the Mediterranean, near the Great Barrier Reef, and in depths of the Atlantic. But none matched the intensity of what was happening at Siren's edge. "The pattern is beautiful," Marina remarked, studying the data streams with a mixture of scientific curiosity and awe. "It's like watching the universe solve an equation we didn't even know existed." Dr. Vasquez was engaged in rapid-fire communication with various global authorities, switching effortlessly between multiple languages as she coordinated what had become humanity's first organized response to potential contact with its ancient past, or perhaps its future. "The Chinese have confirmed quantum activity at their site," she announced, lowering her phone briefly. "And the Russian Academy of Sciences reports similar phenomena off their northern coast. It's happening exactly as the old protocols predicted." Eliseo and Astrid had set up a separate analysis station, working frantically to decode more of the quantum signals that continued to pulse through the growing breach. The messages had become more frequent, but also more cryptic. The convergence approaches. The circle closes. Time bends, but does not break. "I think I understand now," Eliseo said suddenly, pulling up an ancient text on his tablet. "Look at this manuscript from the Library of Alexandria, saved just before the fire. These symbols that scholars thought were astronomical observations, they're not tracking stars, they're tracking quantum frequencies." Astrid leaned in, her eyes widening as she saw the connection. "Of course! The ancients weren't just leaving us technology, they were leaving us instructions. They knew we'd need to understand quantum mechanics before we could receive their message. That's why it was all encoded in mathematical principles that transcend language." A sudden surge in the quantum field sent sparks flying from several pieces of equipment. One of the security team members rushed forward with a fire extinguisher, but Kai was faster, having spent years dealing with electrical fires on his boat. As he helped secure the damaged equipment, he noticed something odd about the quantum breach's reflection in the water. "Dr. Nakamura," he called out, "the distortion pattern, it's changed. The colors aren't just bending anymore, they're forming distinct shapes." Everyone moved to the dock's edge, watching as the impossible colors in the quantum breach began to organize themselves into what looked like geometric symbols, rotating in three-dimensional space. The water beneath seemed to both reflect and refract them, creating a display that appeared to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "It's a key," Dr. Vasquez breathed, her professional composure cracking slightly. "They're showing us how to stabilize the gateway when it opens. These patterns, they're quantum encryption keys." Marina's station erupted with new alerts. "Energy signatures are increasing exponentially. Whatever's coming through that gateway at Meridian, it's already affecting our local spacetime." The implications weren't just theoretical. Around Thunder Point, reality itself seemed to be becoming more fluid. Sound traveled at odd intervals, light bent in impossible ways, and everyone present felt a strange sensation as if time itself was beginning to flow less linearly. "We need to evacuate Misthaven," Kai said firmly, his practical nature asserting itself despite the extraordinary circumstances. "If something goes wrong when that gateway opens..." "Already in progress," one of Dr. Vasquez's security team confirmed. "The town is being cleared under the cover of a gas leak emergency, standard containment protocols." Astrid had been quiet for several minutes, staring at a particular data stream with growing concern. "Helena," she said, addressing Dr. Vasquez by her first name for the first time. "These quantum signatures, they match the theoretical models for..." "I know," Dr. Vasquez cut her off, sharing a meaningful look. "That's why we're implementing maximum containment protocol. If we're right about what's coming through that gateway..." She was interrupted by a new message appearing on the main screen, this one accompanied by a pulse of energy that made every quantum stabilizer surge. The children of Earth have grown well, but knowledge brings responsibility. The test begins at Meridian. Choose wisely. A test? Marina looked up from her station. All of this is some kind of test? Think about it, Eliseo said, his voice filled with sudden understanding. An advanced civilization doesn't just hand over world-changing technology without ensuring it will be used responsibly. They're not just making contact, they're evaluating us. The quantum breach pulsed again, stronger this time, and for a brief moment, everyone present experienced a sensation of being observed by something vast and ancient. The water around Thunder Point had become as smooth as glass, despite the energy coursing through it, creating an almost mirror-like surface that seemed to reflect not just the sky, but possibilities. 1 hour until Meridian, Dr. Vasquez announced, checking her watch. Whatever choice we're going to have to make, whatever test we're about to face, it will determine not just the future of Thunder Point or even our understanding of history, it will determine the future of our entire species. The final hour before Meridian brought changes that challenged everything humanity thought it knew about reality. The quantum breach above Siren's edge had grown to encompass nearly a quarter mile of sky, its swirling colors defying the visible spectrum. The water beneath it had become something else entirely, a liquid mirror that seemed to reflect both past and future simultaneously. Thunder Point's transformation was complete. What had started as Kai's simple fishing dock was now an advanced scientific outpost, bristling with technology that straddled the line between cutting-edge and experimental. The quantum stabilizers had been reinforced with additional units dropped by emergency helicopter deliveries, their combined hum creating a containment field that was barely visible as a slight shimmer in the air. 30 minutes to Meridian, Dr. Vasquez announced, her voice carrying across the now crowded dock. Additional UN personnel had arrived, including specialists in quantum physics, ancient languages, and what appeared to be experts in fields that didn't officially exist. Kai found himself working alongside Marina at what had become the primary monitoring station. Her expertise in marine biology had proved unexpectedly valuable as they tracked the effect of the quantum distortions on local sea life. The results were astonishing. The dolphins are gathering, Marina reported, studying the sonar readings. Not just local pods. We're picking up species that shouldn't be anywhere near these waters. It's like they're being drawn here. Not just marine life, Astrid added from her station. We're getting reports of unusual animal behavior from around the globe. Migratory patterns are shifting. Hibernating species are waking. It's as if the entire biosphere is responding to these quantum frequencies. Eliseo had been working frantically with a team of linguists and mathematicians, attempting to decode the increasingly complex messages emerging from the quantum field. His face was pale with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with intensity. We've cracked another layer of the encryption, he announced suddenly. The test they mentioned, it's not just about technological advancement. Look at this pattern in the quantum harmonics. He pulled up a visualization that showed waves of energy flowing through multiple dimensions, creating patterns that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. These aren't just data streams, he explained. They're emotional frequencies. Whatever's coming through that gateway, they're not just measuring our scientific capabilities. They're measuring our consciousness itself. Dr. Vasquez studied the pattern intently. The Atlantis Protocol predicted this possibility. Section 47b specifically mentions the potential for non-linear evaluation of human evolutionary progress. We thought it was theoretical. She was interrupted by a sudden surge in the quantum field. Every piece of equipment on the dock registered a massive spike in energy, and for a brief moment everyone present experienced a sensation that defied description, as if their consciousness had been gently touched by something vast and ancient. 15 minutes to Meridian, one of the security team called out. Quantum containment field at maximum capacity. The messages appearing on their screens had changed again, becoming both clearer and more profound. The moment of choice approaches. The children must demonstrate wisdom beyond knowledge. Power without understanding leads only to destruction. But what's the right choice? Marina wondered aloud, voicing what everyone was thinking. How do we prove we're ready for whatever they're offering? Kai had been quiet for some time. his experienced sailor's eyes studying the way the quantum distortions affected the water. Something about the pattern nagged at his memory, something he'd seen long ago in his grandfather's old journals. "Dr. Valdenegro," he said suddenly, "those symbols you found in the coral fragment. Can you show them again?" Eliseo quickly pulled up the images, and Kai's suspicion was confirmed. The patterns in the ancient technology matched perfectly with a series of drawings his grandfather had made, sketches of strange lights seen in the waters decades ago. "My grandfather wasn't crazy," Kai muttered. "He actually saw them. They've been watching us all along, waiting for the right moment." A new alert blared from multiple stations simultaneously. The quantum breach had begun to pulse with a regular rhythm, like a heartbeat that transcended dimensions. The water around Thunder Point was now completely still, its surface like polished obsidian. 10 minutes to meridian," Dr. Vasquez announced. "All stations, prepare for potential contact. Whatever's coming through that gateway." She was cut off by the sudden appearance of new text on every screen, this message different from all the others. "The final question approaches. The answer lies not in your machines or your mathematics, but in the choice you make when faced with power beyond measure. Remember, true wisdom knows its own limits." The implications hit everyone at once. This wasn't just a test of humanity's technological advancement. It was a test of its maturity, its wisdom, its readiness to handle knowledge that could reshape reality itself. "Dr. Vasquez," Astrid said quietly, "the quantum signatures. They're identical to theoretical models for manipulating the fabric of space-time itself, whatever they're offering us. Could either elevate humanity to the next stage of evolution," Dr. Vasquez finished, "or give us the power to destroy ourselves completely." The quantum breach pulsed again, and this time the energy patterns formed what looked like a door of light hanging in the air above Siren's edge. Through it, impossible geometries could be glimpsed, suggesting spaces that existed beyond normal dimensions. 5 minutes to meridian, the countdown continued, quantum field stabilizing at new frequency. Kai looked around at the assembled scientists, experts, and officials. Everyone present knew they were about to face a moment that would define not just their own lives, but the future of human civilization itself. The choice they would have to make would echo through history, assuming history still worked the same way after whatever was about to happen. The final minutes before meridian seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, as if time itself was becoming fluid in the presence of the quantum gateway. The door of light hovering above Siren's edge had stabilized into a geometric pattern that hurt the eyes to look at directly, a shape that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human mind could process. 2 minutes to meridian, called out one of Dr. Vasquez's team members, their voice tight with tension. Quantum field integrity at 115%, exceeding theoretical limits. The assembled group on Thunder Point had grown silent, each person acutely aware that they were about to witness something unprecedented in human history. The only sounds were the hum of equipment and the strange, otherworldly frequencies emanating from the gateway. Suddenly, all of Marina's monitoring equipment began registering massive changes in the surrounding environment. "The water temperature around Siren's edge is dropping rapidly," she reported. "It's approaching absolute zero, but somehow remaining liquid." "The laws of physics are being rewritten in real time," Astrid observed, her scientific detachment warring with obvious awe. "They're showing us what's possible when you truly understand the quantum nature of reality." A new message appeared across their screens, this one seeming to pulse with its own inner light. "The gateway opens. The moment of truth approaches. Remember, the power to reshape reality must be tempered by the wisdom to know when not to use it." 1 minute to meridian, came the countdown. Dr. Vasquez moved to the center of the dock, her presence commanding attention. "Whatever happens in the next few minutes will determine the course of human history. Each of you was chosen to be here for a reason. Trust your instincts, but remember your training." The quantum gateway began to pulse with increasing intensity, each wave of energy sending ripples through the fabric of reality around Thunder Point. The stabilizers were straining to maintain the containment field, their surfaces beginning to glow with an inner light. 30 seconds! Eliseo's translation matrix suddenly lit up with new data. The quantum frequencies are shifting. They're forming a pattern I've never seen before. It's like they're creating a new form of mathematics. 15 seconds! The water around Thunder Point had become completely still, its surface reflecting the gateway above in perfect detail, creating the illusion of an infinite tunnel through space and time. 10 seconds. Every piece of electronic equipment on the dock began to react, their displays showing impossible readings as reality itself seemed to flex around them. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Meridian struck. The gateway flared with blinding light, and for a moment everyone present felt their consciousness expand, as if their minds were being gently pulled into a higher dimension. When their vision cleared, they found themselves facing something that defied description. A figure had emerged from the gateway, or perhaps it was multiple figures, or perhaps it was simply a pattern of energy that the human mind was struggling to interpret as a figure. It seemed to shift and flow, its form suggesting both ancient wisdom and future technology. "Greetings, children of Earth," the being communicated, not through sound but directly into their minds. "You have reached the threshold. Your understanding of quantum mechanics has proven sufficient to receive our message, but knowledge alone is not enough. Now comes the true test." The being energy pattern moved closer, and as it did, reality around it seemed to bend and reshape itself. "We offer you a choice," it continued. "Before you is the accumulated knowledge of a civilization that learned to transcend the boundaries of space, time, and dimension itself. With it, you could reshape your world, cure all diseases, end scarcity, even conquer death. But such power comes with a price." Images began to form in the air around them, visions of possible futures, some glorious, others terrifying. They saw humanity spreading across the stars, reshaping planets at will, but they also saw the potential for devastating abuse of such power. "The choice is not whether to accept this knowledge," the being explained, "but how much of it you are ready to receive. We offer you 3 paths." The air shimmered, and 3 distinct patterns of energy appeared before them. The first path offers technological advancement beyond your current dreams, but within safe limits. The second offers full access to quantum manipulation, but requires you to accept guidance and oversight from us. The third offers everything, unrestricted access to all our knowledge, with no limitations or oversight. The being's presence seemed to intensify. "You must choose as one. This decision must represent the wisdom of your species. Choose carefully, for this choice cannot be unmade." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her training asserting itself. "How can we possibly make such a momentous decision? We're only a small group. We can't speak for all of humanity." "You are not chosen randomly," the being responded. "Each of you represents an essential aspect of human consciousness: scientific knowledge, practical wisdom, emotional intelligence, protective instinct, and the ability to bridge different worlds of understanding. Together, you form a microcosm of your species' potential." The quantum gateway pulsed again, and the 3 paths manifested more clearly before them. Each one seemed to call to them in different ways, promising different futures for humanity. Time seemed to stand still as the group faced the 3 paths hovering before them, each one promising a different future for humanity. The quantum gateway pulsed with patient energy, its light casting otherworldly shadows across Thunder Point. The being waited, its form shifting between states of matter and energy in a hypnotic dance. Kai was the first to speak, his voice carrying the weight of generations of maritime wisdom. "I've spent my life learning to respect the sea's power," he said slowly. "The more you understand it, the more you realize how much you don't know. Sometimes the wisest choice is knowing when to stay in harbor." Marina nodded, her scientific training merging with intuition. "In biology, we see what happens when you introduce too much change too quickly into an ecosystem. The results can be catastrophic, no matter how good the intentions. But we can't ignore this opportunity. Eliseo argued, his eyes bright with the possibilities. Think of all the suffering we could end, all the mysteries we could solve. Dr. Vasquez had been silent, her gaze moving between the three paths. Dr. Nakamura, she said finally, you've spent your life studying the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern science. What does your experience tell you? Astrid stepped forward, her usual composure softened by wonder. The most profound lessons from history aren't about power. They're about wisdom. Every great civilization that fell because it gained power before it gained the wisdom to use it properly. The being seemed to pulse with approval. You begin to understand. The true test is not in choosing power, but in recognizing the responsibility that comes with it. Suddenly, Kai remembered something. A story his grandfather had told him about a night when the waters around Thunder Point had glowed with strange lights. He said he heard a voice, Kai recalled, offering him knowledge beyond imagination, but he chose not to accept it, saying humanity wasn't ready yet. Your ancestor was wise, the being communicated. That was the first test. There have been many since at different points in your development. This is the first time you have been ready for a real choice. The group moved closer together, each feeling the weight of the moment. The three paths shimmered before them. The safe path of limited advancement, the guided path of supervised growth, and the unrestricted path of full knowledge. I think I understand, Marina said softly. The real test isn't about which path we choose. It's about how we make the choice. Dr. Vasquez straightened, decision crystallizing in her eyes. We choose the second path, she announced clearly. Not because we fear power, but because we respect it. We choose to learn and grow under guidance until we have proven ourselves ready for more. The being's form shifted, suggesting what might have been approval. Speak as one, if this is truly your choice. One by one, each person present voiced their agreement. Even Eliseo, after a moment's hesitation, nodded. Better to learn properly than to risk destroying everything in our haste. The moment they reached consensus, the quantum gateway pulsed with new energy. The three paths merged into one, and knowledge began to flow. Not an overwhelming flood, but a steady stream of understanding that they could comprehend and manage. You have chosen wisely, the being communicated. The gateway will remain, a bridge between your world and ours. Through it, we will share knowledge at a pace you can absorb safely. Thunder Point will become a center of learning, where humanity can gradually grow into its full potential. The quantum field began to stabilize, the violent energies settling into a controlled, sustainable pattern. The being's form started to fade, but its presence remained in their minds. Remember this day, it said as it retreated toward the gateway. Remember that the greatest wisdom lies not in knowing everything, but in understanding how much there is still to learn. As the being disappeared, the gateway remained, now a stable window between worlds. The wild energies that had threatened to overwhelm Thunder Point had transformed into a controlled quantum field that hummed with potential. Dr. Vasquez turned to address the group, her face showing both exhaustion and hope. This is just the beginning, she said. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Kai looked out over the waters of Ravencrest Bay, forever changed, yet somehow more familiar than ever. What had started with a simple rescue had led to humanity's first steps into a larger universe. Thunder Point would never be just a fishing dock again. It had become humanity's gateway to the future. In the days that followed, the world would learn about what happened at Thunder Point. The UN would establish a permanent research facility there, with Kai, Marina, and the others as key members of the team. But more importantly, humanity had proven itself ready to take its first careful steps into a future filled with unlimited potential. As the sun set on that extraordinary day, the quantum gateway pulsed quietly above Siren's edge, a reminder that sometimes the most important journeys begin with a simple act of courage, and the wisdom to know when to wait, when to learn, and when to grow. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.